At Christmas Eve dinner, my grandfather stopped by and asked, "So, how's the house I gave you 2 years ago?" I just stared at him and said, "What house?" I never got anything. My grandfather slowly turned toward my parents. Their faces instantly went pale. And then, everything exploded. Can you imagine walking into what you think is a heartwarming Christmas reunion, only to stumble straight into a betrayal so deep it shatters your entire world? One sentence, one question, and everything I believed about my family, about my own life, crumbled before my eyes. That Christmas Eve, the brutal Ohio cold was gnawing at me, seeping through my thin jacket as I stood before that glossy oak door. My phone was still warm from Grandpa Arthur's excited call. "Leo, get over here right now. I'm at your parents' new house." His voice practically hummed with joy, like he was bursting to share some incredible secret. Grandpa Arthur, a seriously successful businessman, always tied up with his construction empire in Chicago, rarely got to visit. The sheer thought of seeing him, honestly, made me smile, despite the bone-chilling winter night. I pushed the door open, and instantly, the welcoming warmth from the fireplace and the rich, savory scent of roasted meat enveloped me. Grandpa Arthur was at the head of the dining table, his eyes absolutely sparkling when he saw me. He stood, pulling me into a tight hug, his familiar woody cologne making me forget every ounce of exhaustion in an instant. "Leo, do you like this house?" he asked, his voice overflowing with pride, like he'd just handed me a priceless treasure. "Yes, it's a beautiful house, Grandpa," I replied, trying my best to keep my voice steady. "But it's my parents' house." And that's when it hit. A moment of deafening silence. Grandpa Arthur's face stiffened, his eyes wide as they darted from me to my father, David, then to my stepmother, Karen, sitting across the table. David, usually so composed, suddenly turned ghostly pale, his hand trembling around his wine glass. Karen coughed, forcing a bizarre, stretched-out smile, but her eyes glinted with pure, unadulterated panic. "Your parents' house?" Grandpa Arthur repeated, his voice dropping, cold and sharp as the wind whipping outside. "Leo, explain yourself." I didn't understand what was happening, but a gut-wrenching sense of unease surged through me. I looked at my father, begging him silently for an explanation, but he just lowered his head, completely avoiding my gaze. Karen quickly jumped in, her voice trembling. "Arthur, there must be a misunderstanding. This is the family's house." But Grandpa Arthur didn't even glance at her. He looked only at me, and in that moment, I knew. I knew a terrible, earth-shattering secret was about to be dragged into the light. "Hey everyone, my name is Leo. The story I'm about to tell you, it's about the years I spent living in the crushing shadow of injustice, sidelined by the very people who were supposed to be my family. If you've ever felt like you just didn't belong anywhere, like you were constantly treated as an outsider, maybe you'll understand a little of what I went through. But even if you haven't, I truly hope you'll still hear me out. This is a story about a kid who grew up with a heart full of scars, and how, against all odds, he finally found his own light in the darkest corners. I was born in a small suburban town in Ohio, one of those places where the streets glowed with golden leaves in the fall and everyone knew each other like family. But my family, I quickly learned, was different. My mother, Grace, passed away shortly after giving birth to me, due to medical complications I still don't fully understand. All I've ever known, is that she was the one light I never even got to meet. My father, David, was this stern, distant man. He always kept me at arm's length, almost as if my very existence was a painful reminder he desperately wanted to forget. Then, when I was just 3, he remarried Karen, a woman with a smile that never quite reached her cold, calculating eyes. They had a son together, Sam, or Ben as everyone called him. And Sam? He instantly became the absolute center of their universe. To my father, Sam was the pride, the future, the only legacy of the Marston family. To Karen, Sam was everything. She lived to protect and utterly spoil him. And me? I was the stepchild. The unwanted kid. Just a faint, inconvenient shadow in the house I was supposed to call home. From a really young age, I felt that difference. It was palpable. When I was 5, I can still picture myself in the corner of the living room, just watching. Watching Sam tear open a remote-controlled toy car, the kind every single kid dreamed of. Me? I got a used plastic car with chipped wheels. My father, David, just shrugged and said it was good enough for me. And Karen? She'd chime in with, Sam needs new things to develop his intellect, as if I wasn't even worthy of anything better. Later, when I brought home high grades from school, my father would just nod, a dismissive, not bad, but don't get complacent. But if Sam, his golden boy, snagged AC on a test, the whole house would erupt in celebration, like he'd won a Nobel Prize. I wasn't a jealous kid, honestly. I wasn't. All I ever truly wanted was to be loved. To be acknowledged. Even just once. But as the days bled into years, I painfully realized that in my father's and Karen's eyes, I was simply never, ever good enough. Karen had this way of saying things like, Leo, why don't you try to be more like Sam, or you should just be grateful to live in this house. Those words, no matter how softly spoken, cut into me like 1,000 tiny knives. I started to wonder, deep down, was I really just a burden? Was I truly, fundamentally unworthy of love? Our family wasn't poor, but we definitely weren't rich either. My father, David, worked as a manager at a local insurance company, while Karen stayed home, doting on Sam like he was some little king. And I wasn't allowed to complain. Not ever. My father always reminded me I was lucky to even have a roof over my head. But that roof? It never truly felt like mine. My room was this tiny, cramped attic space, with a creaky old bed and a window that just overlooked a dark, grimy alley. Meanwhile, Sam had a spacious room, overflowing with brand new toys and posters of all his favorite bands. Once, just once, I dared to ask my father why I couldn't have a room downstairs, like Sam. He snapped at me, don't ask for too much, Leo. Know your place. I grew up with words like those. Constant, piercing reminders that I simply wasn't important in this family. But I refused to let myself drown in that sorrow. I learned to smile. To pretend everything was fine, even while a silent storm raged inside me. I promised myself, one day, I would escape this family's shadow. I would prove I wasn't the useless person they so clearly thought I was. When I turned 18, I graduated high school with decent grades. Nobody at home really noticed, but I did. I dreamed of going to college, of becoming an engineer, or doing something to make Grandpa Arthur, the only person who genuinely seemed to care about me, proud. But that dream was swiftly, brutally crushed. One evening, when I carefully asked my father about applying for scholarships or student loans for college, he looked at me with those cold, distant eyes. Leo, he said, we don't have enough money. Sam needs to be prioritized. He has great potential, and we have to invest in him. I just stood there, stunned, feeling the entire world collapse beneath my feet. Sam. The brother who only ever played video games and hung out with friends. He was the one chosen to fulfill his potential. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded. And I left the room. That night, lying on my old, creaky bed, staring up at the cracked ceiling, I made a silent, fierce promise to myself. I would rise. On my own. If my parents didn't believe in me, then I would believe in myself. So, I started working. At the local Walmart, first as a cashier, then hustling in the stockroom. The job? It was brutal. Long night shifts, slogging through holidays, dealing with endlessly difficult customers. It left me utterly exhausted. But I never complained. Not once. Every single dollar I earned was a small, defiant step towards escaping my family. I rented a tiny, run-down apartment. Stained walls, leaky faucet, you name it. But it was mine. At least it was mine. I no longer had to endure Karen's snide remarks or see my father's perpetually disappointed looks. Meanwhile, Sam was living the high life, completely supported by them. He went to a prestigious private school, drove a brand new car my father bought him, and never had to lift a single finger. I remember one time Karen actually came into the store where I worked. She saw me behind the cash register and, oh, the smirk on her face. Leo, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. This is what you're doing? Such a shame. Sam will never have to do menial work like this. I gritted my teeth so hard, forcing a fake smile. But inside, I was screaming. Screaming. Why? Why wasn't I worthy of the same opportunities as Sam? Those years, they were steeped in loneliness. I didn't have many friends because every waking moment outside of work was spent hustling, saving every penny. But I wasn't entirely alone. Grandpa Arthur, he was the one bright spot, the single unwavering light in my life. He lived in Chicago running this massive construction company. A true man of industry. Occasionally, when he actually had a spare moment, he'd call me. And those calls? They were my lifeline. He'd talk about his latest projects, ask about my life, and always say, "Leo, you're a strong young man. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." I never told him how my father and Karen really treated me. I didn't want to burden him, didn't want him to worry. And part of me, the vulnerable part, feared that if I spoke up, he'd think I was weak. Grandpa Arthur was also the only person who ever really talked about my mother, Grace. He said she was this gentle, book-loving woman who dreamed of a fair world. He even blamed himself for not being there when she gave birth to me, saying work had kept him away. If I had been there, he'd often say, his voice catching, things might have been different. I never blamed him. I only wished, deeply wished, I could have met her. Even just once. Just to know what it felt like to be loved by her. As the years crawled by, I grew accustomed to my fiercely independent life. I learned to fix the perpetually leaky plumbing in my apartment, to cook simple, solitary meals, and most importantly, to somehow keep my heart from breaking any further. But deep inside, there was always this gnawing emptiness. A gaping void where a true family should have been. What I didn't know then, couldn't possibly imagine, was that while I was meticulously trying to build my own life, a colossal secret was being meticulously hidden by my father, David, and Karen. A secret that, when it finally exploded, would change absolutely everything. By the time I was 20, I was still living in that same tiny rented apartment on the south side of town, still working soul-crushing night shifts at the supermarket. Empty mornings, simple meals, and perpetually interrupted sleep had become so routine they no longer even felt unusual. I didn't have much, no, but I had my freedom. I had my own space. And I had a shred of self-respect, hard-won and paid for with years of silent endurance. Then, one early summer afternoon, as I was mindlessly processing payments at the employee checkout, my phone buzzed. It was a text. From Karen. Come to the new house tonight. Address, 1432 Hollow Creek. Small party. I read the message 3 times, staring at the screen like it held some secret meaning, like it would magically explain itself. New house? I had never heard them even mention anything about moving. No hint they were even looking. And certainly, no one had asked if I wanted to move in with them. I hesitated. I hesitated. Part of me just wanted to ignore it, to pretend the text never existed. But then I thought, maybe this was it. Maybe this was a chance to reconnect, even just a little. Even if it was just some polite, formal gathering. I wanted to go. Maybe to congratulate them. Maybe to prove that I wasn't that sullen, quiet kid anymore. I had changed. And I held on to this desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, they had changed too. I stopped by a small liquor store near the supermarket and picked out the most affordable bottle of red wine I could find. Then I swung by the embroidery shop to collect a handkerchief I'd ordered the previous week. A small, thoughtful gift with the initials DM David Marston embroidered on it. I didn't have much money, but I wanted the gift I brought to be thoughtful. The new house was in this newly developed residential area on the west side of town, a place I had literally never set foot in before. As my beat-up car turned onto a street lined with freshly planted maples and manicured green lawns, it felt like I was crossing into another world entirely. 2-story, almost ostentatious houses with grand wooden doors, sleek gray-tiled roofs, and charming red brick steps. Everything about it just exuded a sense of abundance and order that I had never, ever felt in our old house. I parked in front of the cream-colored home Karen had given me the address for. It had a stone-stepped front yard, a wide, inviting porch, and elegant arched windows overlooking a budding garden. I got out of the car, clutching the bottle of wine and the small gift, and just stood there for a few seconds in front of the door. For some inexplicable reason, my heart was pounding. Not from excitement, no. It was this indescribable feeling stirring deep within me, like I was about to step into something that fundamentally didn't belong to me. Karen opened the door. She was wearing a silk dress, her makeup meticulously, almost perfectly done. "Oh, Leo, come in," she said, her smile as thin and as forced as the layer of blush on her cheeks. I stepped inside, my eyes sweeping over everything. A spacious living room. Glossy wooden floors, a grand granite fireplace, plush beige armchairs, a classic chandelier. Family photos already adorned the walls. My father and Karen's wedding picture. Sam holding a sports trophy. And me? No photos of me, of course. I wasn't surprised. My father, David, was in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine, dressed in a crisp white shirt, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. When he saw me, he offered a single, curt nod. "Oh, you're here." Nothing more. I handed him the wine and the gift, forcing out, "Congratulations on the new house, Dad." He took them, set them on the table without even a glance, and turned away. The party was just a handful of people, new neighbors, an older couple who were friends, and one of my father's colleagues. They chatted animatedly about rising property prices, interior design trends, and the extravagant pool they planned to build in the backyard. I sat in a corner, silent, just listening. No one asked me where I was from. No one even noticed that I quietly poured myself water instead of wine. "We had to search forever to find this house," Karen announced proudly to the person next to her, her voice brimming with self-satisfaction. "Luckily, we closed the deal just before the market prices shot up." "David really has a great eye for houses," someone added. My father nodded, smiling, not denying a word. I sat there, trying to smile along, trying to convince myself I was happy for them. I genuinely wanted to congratulate them, not for the house itself, but because I truly believed they had finally found something that made them happy. What I didn't know, couldn't possibly grasp in that moment, was that I was actually congratulating them for taking a gift that, by all rights, belonged entirely to me. That night, when I finally returned to my lonely, rented apartment, I pulled out my phone, intending to send Grandpa Arthur a quick message, just to check in. But I hesitated. He was getting older, always so busy. I didn't want to bother him. I set the phone down, lay on my bed, and stared up at the peeling ceiling. Then, I just drifted off to sleep, completely, utterly unaware of the devastating truth lying silently beneath my feet, like an unexploded bomb, just waiting to detonate. After that day, after I endured the housewarming party, everything seemed to settle back into its old, familiar rhythm. Or, at least, the half-hearted routine I had long grown painfully accustomed to. No one ever mentioned that day again. No one asked what I thought of the new house. And, of course, absolutely no one ever brought up the possibility of me moving in with them. But then, something genuinely strange started happening. From that point on, for every major holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Sam's birthday, even my father and Karen's wedding anniversary, I received an invitation to their house. These weren't warm, heartfelt invitations, mind you. They were always curt text messages, 6 p.m. "Come for dinner. Sam's looking forward to seeing you. We have guests. Be on time." I went. Not because I actually believed they had changed, but because some ingrained part of me still felt the duty of a son. Each time, I brought a small gift, carefully chosen and wrapped by hand. But my gifts were usually just set aside, unopened in my presence, and never once did anyone offer a clear word of thanks. And the strangest thing of all? They started pulling me into family photos. The first time was that Christmas. Karen called me over. "Leo, stand closer to Sam. We're taking a family picture." I was utterly surprised, but I stepped forward. My father stood in the middle, his arm around Sam's shoulders. I stood awkwardly at the very edge of the frame, forcing a stiff, unnatural smile. As the camera clicked, I felt like I had just been dropped into some wordless play, and I was merely a supporting character, thrown in just to fill out the cast. In the months that followed, They kept pulling me into those photos. At first, it was with the whole family. Later, sometimes just with my father. Once, Karen even placed her hand on my shoulder, smiling so brightly it felt completely fake. I didn't understand what was happening. Before, I had always been deliberately excluded from moments like these. The photos hanging in our old house never featured me, not once. So, why were they doing this now? I asked once, lightly, after Sam's birthday dinner, why have we been taking so many family photos lately? Karen just laughed, a brittle sound, and said, "Oh, we just want to capture memories. You're part of the family, too, aren't you?" I nodded, but my heart felt like lead. I wasn't naive. I knew something was deeply, profoundly wrong, but I just couldn't put a name to it. I only felt like I was being led along, manipulated, forced into a fabricated frame where I never truly belonged. As if I were merely playing the role of the harmonious eldest son in a photo meant purely for display, not as my authentic self. And then, on Christmas, when I was 23, the truth finally, violently, ripped through everything. It was bitterly, brutally cold that day. I had just finished my shift at 4:30 in the afternoon, sitting in my lonely rented apartment, sipping lukewarm coffee. My usual plan was to show up a little late, just enough to make an appearance, grab a few bites, pose for those strange photos, and then make my escape early. But then my phone rang. "Leo, come over right now. I'm at your new house. 1432 Hollow Creek. I wanted to surprise you." I froze. Grandpa Arthur was here. In Ohio. He rarely left Chicago. His construction company always kept him tied up. I quickly threw on my jacket, my mind reeling, and rushed out the door. 1,000 questions swirled through my head. Why hadn't he told me he was coming? And why, for God's sake, was he at my father's house? When I arrived, the house was just glowing with Christmas lights. Wreaths hung on the door, and the twinkling lights of a Christmas tree shimmered invitingly through the window. I knocked, my heart absolutely pounding against my ribs. Karen opened the door, her forced smile instantly stiffening when she saw me. "Leo, why are you?" She stopped abruptly, her eyes darting frantically over my shoulder. Then I heard Grandpa Arthur's voice from inside. "Leo, come in, my boy." Grandpa Arthur stood in the living room, tall and imposing, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier. He hugged me, a tight embrace that carried both genuine excitement and this strange, underlying tension. "I wanted to surprise the whole family," he said, looking around the lavish room. "This house? It's wonderful, isn't it? Are you happy living here?" I hesitated, a sudden, icy wave of unease rising within me. I don't live here, Grandpa," I mumbled. "I just visit." Grandpa Arthur's face instantly changed. His smile vanished. His eyes narrowed, snapping from me to my father, David, who stood near the fireplace, a glass of wine clutched in his hand. Karen quickly jumped in, her voice sickly sweet. "Arthur, there must be a misunderstanding. Leo likes living independently, don't you, dear?" She looked at me, her eyes practically commanding me to agree. But Grandpa Arthur didn't even spare her a glance. He fixed his piercing gaze on me, his voice dropping. "Leo, tell me the truth. You don't live here." I took a deep, shaky breath, feeling the suffocating weight of the entire room pressing down on my shoulders. "I live in a rented apartment, Grandpa," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "On the south side of town. I pay for it with my supermarket wages." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence descended, as if all the air had been sucked straight out of the room. My father, David, bowed his head, his hand tightening so hard around his glass I thought it might shatter. Karen started to speak, her voice trembling. "Arthur, we thought it was best for Leo. He wanted to be independent, and Sam needs space, too." "Enough." Grandpa Arthur cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "David, explain yourself." Then it came. The bombshell. 2 years ago, I sent you $400,000 to buy a 3-bedroom house in this neighborhood. A gift for Leo, to give him a good start. I made it clear, the house was for Leo. So why is he living in a rundown apartment, while you and your family are living in that very house? My father's face went ghastly pale, as if all the blood had drained right out of his body. Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I stood there, utterly stunned, feeling the ground literally crumble beneath me. A house? For me? $400,000. I looked at Grandpa Arthur, then at my father, frantically searching for any explanation, any sign that this was just a misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. My father set his glass down, his voice shaky, but trying desperately to stay composed. I thought the house would be better used by the whole family. Leo's independent. He doesn't need a big house like this. Sam's young. He needs a good environment to grow, to study. Doesn't need it? Grandpa Arthur roared, stepping toward my father. You're saying he doesn't need it? Leo, the grandson I entrusted to your care, is living in a run-down apartment, working night shifts to survive, while you and your wife live in the house that was meant for him. What did you do with the money I sent? You put the house in your name, didn't you? My father didn't answer. He just lowered his head, his shoulders visibly trembling. Karen, finally regaining her voice, interjected, Arthur, you don't understand. Leo isn't my biological son. Sam is the future of this family. Leo, he doesn't deserve a house like this. He's just, shut up. Grandpa Arthur bellowed, his voice echoing so powerfully it seemed to shake the very foundations of the room. Doesn't deserve. Leo is Grace's flesh and blood. My daughter's son. He's my grandson, and I trusted you, David, to take care of him. But what have you done? You stole the gift I meant for him. Deceived me with these fake family photos. He pointed at the picture on the wall, the one of the whole family in the living room with me awkwardly standing at the edge. I thought Leo was living happily here. I believed the photos you sent. But it turns out it was all a charade to hide your greed. My throat tightened, a raw, burning sensation. The photos. All those times I was called over to pose, those staged moments that never quite made sense. It was all a monstrous deception. All to fool Grandpa Arthur, to make him believe I was part of this happy, harmonious family. I looked at my father, waiting for an explanation. An apology. Anything. But he remained silent, his eyes resolutely avoiding mine. Leo. Grandpa Arthur turned to me, his voice softening, but still absolutely resolute. Go get your things. You're coming to Chicago with me. This house? I'll make damn sure it belongs to you, just as I originally intended. And you, David, he added, his voice like ice, I'll be speaking with my lawyer. You'll answer for what you've done. Karen burst into tears, a dramatic sob, but I felt nothing. No pity for her. My father finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Leo, I just wanted what was best for the family. Best for the family? I repeated, my voice calm, but radiating a chilling cold. You never once considered me part of this family. I've spent my whole life trying to make you proud, but all you ever saw was Sam. You took away my chance, my future, and you didn't even bother to tell me the truth. I turned away, unable to look at him any longer. Grandpa Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes filled with pain, yes, but also with unwavering determination. Let's go, Leo. You don't need to stay here anymore. The brutal chill of the Christmas night bit into my skin as we stepped out of the house that was, by rights, supposed to be mine. The dim glow of streetlights illuminated the pristine, snow-covered street, and I could feel my heavy, ragged breaths blending invisibly into the frigid air. Grandpa Arthur led me to a sleek black SUV parked patiently by the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit, opened the door for us. To the hotel first, Grandpa Arthur said, his voice low but firm. I slid into the back seat beside him, feeling like I was stepping into an entirely different world. A world I never, ever thought I belonged to. Are you okay, Leo? Grandpa Arthur asked, his eyes gentle, yet piercing, as if trying to read every single chaotic thought in my mind. I don't know, Grandpa, I replied, my voice barely there. Everything's happening so fast. I still don't fully understand any of it. He nodded, placing a comforting hand on my knee. I know, he said softly, but from now on, things will be different. You'll come to Chicago with me. We'll start over. Just the two of us. I looked out the window, the distant Christmas lights blurring past like faint, fleeting sparks. Chicago. A city I'd only ever heard about through Grandpa Arthur's incredible stories, where he'd built his construction empire from absolutely nothing. I had never been there. Never thought I'd ever have the chance. But now, it was where I would begin again. A new life. A real chance to finally escape the suffocating shadow of my past. The very next morning, we took an early flight to Chicago. I sat by the window, gazing down at the endless, snow-covered fields below, feeling an almost dizzying sense that I was leaving behind an old, worn-out world for something entirely new, a dream I hadn't even dared to imagine. Grandpa Arthur sat beside me, quietly immersed in a business newspaper, but every now and then, he'd glance over, offering an encouraging, knowing smile. When the plane finally touched down at O'Hare, a biting Chicago wind was there to greet us. James, Grandpa Arthur's driver, was waiting with the familiar, sleek SUV. We drove through the bustling city streets, where skyscrapers towered overhead, their steel and glass gleaming under the winter sun. I had never, ever seen anything like it. Ohio, with its narrow, sleepy roads and modest houses, suddenly felt like a distant, faded memory. The car eventually turned into an upscale suburban neighborhood where the streets were paved with elegant stone, lined with ancient oaks and graced by sprawling, magnificent mansions. James stopped in front of a massive iron gate, beyond which a sweeping driveway led to a majestic three-story mansion, surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns and even vibrant red rose bushes, somehow blooming even in the dead of winter. My jaw literally dropped. I couldn't believe my eyes. Is this your house, Grandpa? I asked, my voice trembling. Grandpa Arthur laughed heartily, a warm, booming sound, clapping me on the shoulder. Welcome to my home, Leo. And now, it's your home too. Grandpa Arthur's mansion wasn't just a house. It was a palace. The intricately carved wooden front door swung open into a grand foyer with gleaming marble floors, a breathtaking spiral staircase leading upstairs, and striking abstract paintings adorning the walls. The living room alone was easily 3 times the size of my entire rented apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a sprawling backyard garden, complete with a shimmering pool and an outdoor barbecue area. The rich scent of pine and fine leather from the luxurious furniture made me feel like I had just stepped into a 5-star hotel. I don't know what to say, I whispered, standing utterly dumbfounded in the middle of the living room, still clutching my small, pitiful bag of belongings. You don't need to say anything, Grandpa Arthur replied, a gentle smile on his face as he led me upstairs. Your room is here. He opened a door to a spacious bedroom. A king-sized bed, a beautiful walnut desk, and a window overlooking the lush garden. A brand-new laptop sat invitingly on the desk, and a soft, plush rug covered the floor. This is where you can start over, he said, his voice kind. No pressure, no burdens. Just a fresh start. I sat on the edge of the bed, pinching myself. It felt completely surreal, like I was living a dream. Just hours ago, I was in my dismal, run-down apartment with its leaky faucet and peeling ceiling. Now, I was here in a room I wouldn't have even dared to imagine. But alongside all this overwhelming awe, there was a lingering ache. The house in Ohio. The house that was meant to be mine. It still felt like a sharp thorn, lodged deep in my heart. That evening, Grandpa Arthur took me to this incredibly fancy restaurant in downtown Chicago. We sat in a quiet corner, the candlelight flickering softly on the table. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine, but I only took a small, hesitant sip, still utterly unaccustomed to such luxury. Leo, he began, his voice low, serious, almost grave. There are things we need to talk about. About your father, the house, and what really happened. I nodded, my heart starting to pound. I knew, instinctively, this conversation wouldn't be easy. 2 years ago, he continued, I sent David $400,000 to buy that house in Hollow Creek. I wanted it to be a gift for you, a solid foundation for you to build your future. I was busy with the company, unable to oversee the purchase myself, so I trusted David to handle it. I thought he would follow my wishes. He paused, his eyes darkening, a deep sadness mixing with anger. But I was wrong. So wrong. I clenched my fists under the table, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. So, Dad kept the house for himself. That's not all, Grandpa Arthur said, his voice now thick with unconcealed anger. I've been sending David money since you were a child. Not just for the house. I sent money every single year. To cover your school fees, your clothes, everything you needed to grow up in the best conditions. I thought David was taking care of you the way I wanted him to. But today, when I heard you talk about living in a rented apartment, working night shifts at a supermarket, I realized he kept all of it. For himself. And his new family. It felt like someone had literally punched me in the chest. School fees. Clothes. All the things I never had. All those years wearing hand-me-downs, eating instant noodles, working myself to exhaustion just to make ends meet. It could have been so different. My father, the man I tried so desperately hard to please, had taken not only the house, but also every single opportunity Grandpa Arthur had meant for me. I didn't know about any of that money, I said, my voice choking raw. Dad never told me. I thought he didn't have enough, so I had to manage on my own. Grandpa Arthur slammed his hand on the table, making the wine glasses tremble. That bastard, he growled, drawing startled glances from nearby tables. I trusted him with you, thinking he'd treat you well. But he betrayed me. And he betrayed your mother, Grace. Hearing my mother's name, Grace, it made my eyes sting. I had never met her, but through Grandpa Arthur's stories, I knew she was a gentle woman who had wanted a good life for me. The thought that my father had stolen what she and Grandpa Arthur intended for me ignited a fury in me that I wouldn't suppress. What are you going to do, Grandpa? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, though deep down I could already guess part of the answer. I'm going to sue David, he said, his voice chillingly cold, his eyes hard as flint. I'll make sure that house is transferred to you, and I'll cut off all financial support to him. He doesn't deserve a single cent. I just stared at the table in silence. Part of me, the raw, wounded part, screamed for my father to pay, to face the full, bitter consequences of his actions. But another part, the part that had grown up steeped in neglect and pain, just wanted to let it go. I was so tired. Tired of living in resentment. I didn't want my new life in Chicago, this fragile new beginning, to be tainted by endless lawsuits and bitter disputes. Grandpa, I said, my voice soft but impossibly firm. Don't sue him. I know you're angry, and God knows, so am I. But it's already happened. I don't want to drag this out. Cutting off his financial support, that's enough to make them realize they can't keep taking advantage of you. I just want to start over here. With you. Grandpa Arthur looked at me, his eyes slowly softening, though I could still see the deep, lingering pain in them. Are you sure, Leo? You have every right to claim what's rightfully yours. I'm sure, I replied, meeting his gaze. That house? It doesn't matter anymore. Not really. I want to build my future, Grandpa. Not live to constantly fix the past. He nodded slowly, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. You're stronger than I thought, Leo. Your mother, Grace, would be so incredibly proud of you. The weeks that followed in Chicago were an intense, emotional journey. I moved permanently into Grandpa Arthur's mansion, and each day felt like I was literally learning to live again, from scratch. Grandpa Arthur didn't just give me a home, he gave me a genuine chance to rediscover myself. He took me to visit his construction company, a sleek, modern building in bustling downtown Chicago, with bright, open offices and a vibrant, energetic team of employees. He introduced me to everyone there, proudly, as Arthur Marston's grandson. And for the very first time in my life, I felt truly recognized. Seen. Like a person of actual value. Would you like to try working here? He asked me one day, as we stood overlooking a bustling construction site in the suburbs. You don't have to do big things right away. You can start with small projects, learn as you go. I hesitated. I had never imagined myself in construction, with all its technical blueprints and complex numbers, but the absolute trust shining in Grandpa Arthur's eyes made me want to try. More than anything. I'll give it a shot, Grandpa, I said, a hesitant smile forming. But I can't promise I'll be good at it right away. He laughed heartily, a booming, warm sound. No one's good from the start, Leo. but you have heart and determination. That's all I need. I started working at his company, initially as an assistant in the planning department, organizing documents and diligently tracking project progress. The work wasn't easy, not by a long shot, but with each passing day, I absorbed everything. I learned to read complex blueprints, to understand intricate construction processes, and I even began cautiously contributing ideas during meetings. My colleagues, who at first probably only knew me as the boss's grandson, gradually started looking at me with genuine respect. They saw me work hard, stay late to finish tasks, and stubbornly refuse to rely on Grandpa Arthur for any special treatment. Outside of work, I truly began exploring Chicago. I walked through its vibrant, lively streets, visited incredible museums, and spent hours just sitting in coffee shops, reading books, or simply watching the endless flow of people pass by. For the very first time in my life, I felt like I finally had room to breathe, to dream, to actually become a better version of myself. Even though life in Chicago was blossoming and giving me so much hope, the deep scars of my past didn't just fade away easily. Some nights, I'd lie awake in the luxurious bed of my new room, yet my mind would drift back, dreaming of my old, cramped rented apartment. I'd hear Karen's mocking voice or see my father's cold, disappointed gaze, and I'd wonder if I truly deserved this incredible new life, or if it was all just a beautiful dream that would vanish the moment I woke up. Grandpa Arthur noticed when I grew quiet. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, he handed me an old, framed photo. It was my mother, Grace, smiling brightly, holding a small dog. "Your mother always wanted you to be happy," he said softly. "I couldn't be there for her when she needed me most. But I won't let that happen with you." I held the frame, tears silently, painfully, falling down my cheeks. "I wish I could have met her," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "You're more like her than you know," he said. "She was strong, but gentle. You have her heart." Those words, they were like a healing balm to my wounded soul. I started keeping a journal, writing down my thoughts, my dreams, even my deepest pain. I no longer wanted to run from my past. I wanted to face it, understand it, and let it make me stronger. One morning, about 3 months after moving to Chicago, a letter arrived from Ohio. The envelope had no sender's name, but the familiar handwriting made my heart instantly tighten in a vice. It was from my father, David. My hands trembling slightly, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with these short, handwritten lines. "Leo, I know I have no right to write this letter. What I've done is unforgivable. I was wrong to keep the house, to keep the money your grandfather sent for you. I let the pain of losing your mother turn me into a terrible father. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know I regret it. Karen and Sam have moved out of the house. I'm in the process of transferring ownership to you, as your grandfather intended. I hope one day you can look at me without seeing disappointment. David." I read the letter 3 times, each word a fresh cut. My emotions were a chaotic mix of anger, deep pain, and a faint, surprising sense of relief. I honestly didn't know if I could forgive him. The years of being abandoned, of being treated like an outsider, they couldn't be erased by a single, belated letter. But I knew one thing for certain. I didn't want to carry that resentment forever. I showed the letter to Grandpa Arthur. He read it silently, slowly, for a long, long time. Then he looked up, his gaze steady. "It's your decision, Leo," he said. "If you want to take the house, I'll help you. If not, I'll respect your choice." I thought about that house in Hollow Creek, with its perfect green lawn and warm, inviting fireplace. It had once been the unattainable dream of my childhood. But now? Now, I didn't need that house to feel worthy. "I don't want the house, Grandpa," I said, my voice clear and resolved. "I want to sell it. And I want to use the money to go to college. I want to become an engineer, like I always dreamed." Grandpa Arthur smiled then, a genuine, expansive smile, his eyes sparkling with pure pride. "That's my grandson," he said, his voice brimming with warmth. I enrolled in a university right here in Chicago, majoring in civil engineering. With Grandpa Arthur's unwavering support and the money from selling the house, I finally began the educational journey I once thought was completely impossible. The first days at school weren't easy, I'll tell you that. I was older than most of my classmates, and the complex technical concepts often kept me up late, poring over textbooks. But I didn't give up. Not once. Whenever I felt like quitting, I'd think of my mother, Grace, and Grandpa Arthur, and the fierce promise I'd made to myself. I wouldn't let my past define my future. In Chicago, I also found new friends, people who had no idea about my complicated past, but simply liked me for who I was right now. I joined an engineering club where I met Emily, a brilliant girl with a radiant smile who loved to tease me about my habit of taking overly detailed notes. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had found a true community, a place where I genuinely, authentically belonged. Grandpa Arthur remained my greatest anchor through it all. He wasn't just a guide, he was my truest friend, always reminding me that I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. Some evenings, we'd sit by the fireplace, sharing stories about my mother, Grace, about the early days when he built his company from nothing, and about all my burgeoning dreams. The house in Ohio was eventually sold, and the money was deposited directly into my tuition account. My father never contacted me again after that, and I didn't reach out to him either. Maybe one day I'll be ready to talk, to truly forgive. But for now, I needed to focus on the present, on what I could build. 2 years have now passed since that fateful Christmas night, when the ugly truth about the house and Grandpa Arthur's money finally exploded into the open. Chicago has truly become my home. Not just because of its bustling streets or towering skyscrapers, but because it's where I finally found myself. I'm in my second year of college, majoring in civil engineering. And every single day, I feel closer to my dream of becoming an engineer, a dream my father once so casually crushed with the pathetic excuse of not enough money. I found a community of genuine friends, a clear, burning purpose, and most importantly, an undeniable sense that I absolutely deserve everything I've achieved. But while I was meticulously building my new life here in Chicago, back in Ohio, my father's family, David, Karen, and Sam, was slowly, inevitably, falling apart. I didn't know much about them over those 2 years, just a few scattered rumors from old acquaintances back in town. They said my father had lost his job at the insurance company, that Karen no longer hosted her lavish, pretentious parties, and that Sam, the supposed pride of the Marston family, had dropped out of college after just one single semester. I didn't dwell on it. The past was the past, and I had learned, painfully, not to let it drag me back. Until one day, the past came knocking. One late autumn afternoon, as I was deep in study for midterms in the university library, my phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number from Ohio. I hesitated. My gut screamed not to answer, but I did. Karen's voice came through, weak, trembling, completely devoid of the haughty arrogance it once carried. "Leo, it's Karen," she said, her voice faltering, almost cracking. "I know you're busy, but I need to talk to you about the family." I gripped the phone tighter, a cold chill running straight down my spine. Family? The word felt foreign, repulsive, coming from her. "What's going on?" I asked, my tone far colder than I had intended. "We're in trouble, Leo. Real trouble." I thought, maybe you could help. I stayed silent, letting her squirm, letting her continue. Karen then launched into this long, rambling story, her voice a desperate mix of raw panic and a desperate attempt to cling to some semblance of dignity. After Grandpa Arthur cut off all financial support, my father, David, completely lost his steady income. He'd been fired from his job, apparently too distracted and overwhelmed by the family's turmoil. Karen, having never held a job a day in her life since marrying my father, couldn't find work. They'd sold most of their possessions to pay off mounting debts, but it simply wasn't enough. The house in Hollow Creek, which had been transferred to me and later sold, was no longer theirs to live in. They had moved to a small apartment on the very edge of town, which Karen, with her usual flair for drama, described as cramped and utterly unworthy of our family. "And Sam." Karen paused, her voice choking. "Sam's struggling, Leo. He's working at a fast food restaurant, but he's not used to it. He doesn't know how to handle things like that. He needs help." I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Not out of amusement, but from the sheer, bitter irony of it all. Sam. The spoiled little brother who was once treated like a king. Now he had to work to survive. Sam, who had a brand new car, a room overflowing with toys, and never, ever had to worry about money, was now struggling in a job I had done since I was 18. I felt a fleeting sense of satisfaction, yes, but it was quickly replaced by a hollow emptiness. "Karen," I said, my voice calm, but firm as steel. "You're calling me for help? After everything that happened? After Dad took my house? After you said I didn't deserve it? You think I'll just forget the years I was treated like an outsider, like a burden?" Karen was silent for a moment, then spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "Leo, I know we were wrong, but we're family. Sam's your brother. You can't turn your back on your family." "Family?" I repeated, the word laced with icy bitterness. "You and Dad never treated me like family. You said I wasn't worthy. Dad took not just the house, but the money Grandpa Arthur sent for my education, for my entire life. And now you want me to help Sam? The one who was always favored over me? No, Karen. Let Sam learn to stand on his own, just like I had to. Let your family figure it out. I don't owe you anything." I hung up the phone, my hand still gripping it tightly, my heart pounding. Karen's words echoed in my mind. Family. Sam needs help. But those words no longer had the power to sway me. Not after everything they had done. Over the past 2 years, I hadn't heard directly from my father, David, Karen, or Sam. Bits of gossip from Ohio would sometimes reach me through old acquaintances, but I never sought them out. I was too busy building my new life in Chicago, my classes, my projects at Grandpa Arthur's company, and evenings spent talking with Emily, my increasingly close friend. But those rumors, no matter how much I tried to ignore them, still crept in, like cold gusts from the past. My father, David, had once been a supremely confident man, always maintaining this calm, authoritative presence in the family. He worked at the insurance company, earning a salary that easily supported a comfortable lifestyle for Karen and Sam. But after that devastating Christmas night 2 years ago, when Grandpa Arthur cut off all financial support, everything began to unravel for them. His company faced unexpected market struggles, and he, utterly distracted by his own family tensions, couldn't hold on to his managerial position. He was fired 6 months after the incident and hadn't found stable work since. The savings he had accumulated from Grandpa Arthur's money that was meant for me, had been squandered on ridiculous luxuries. A new car for Sam. Lavish family vacations. Expensive parties, all to keep up appearances with their neighbors. When Grandpa Arthur's money well finally dried up, they simply couldn't sustain that artificial lifestyle anymore. Karen, once so proud of being the perfect housewife, couldn't adapt to actually earning a living. She had never worked, never needed to. Her skills were limited to hosting parties and shopping sprees. When the family was forced to move out of the Hollow Creek house, the house I sold to invest in my future, they relocated to a small, run-down 2-bedroom apartment on the very edge of town, which Karen, predictably, called unworthy. The apartment was cramped, stained, and had a leaky plumbing system, a stark, painful contrast to the luxurious home they once called their own. They sold Sam's car, his expensive toy collection, and even Karen's prized jewelry. But the debts just kept piling up, from mortgage loans to unpaid bills. And Sam, the brother once hailed as the future of the Marston family, dropped out of college after just 1 semester. Accustomed to being pampered, he simply couldn't handle the pressure of academics or responsibility. Instead of continuing his education, Sam took a job at a fast food restaurant in town. But that job, standing behind a counter, dealing with demanding customers and working long shifts, was something he was entirely unprepared for. Sam, who once mocked me for doing similar work, now faced the brutal reality that he completely lacked the skills or patience to succeed in such an environment. His coworkers complained that he was slow, unfocused, and prone to endless mistakes. He was fired after 3 months and, since then, has bounced from job to job, never lasting long. I learned these excruciating details not because I sought them out, but through hushed whispers from old acquaintances in Ohio. A few of Grandpa Arthur's friends, still in touch with him, shared the story of David's family's downfall as a cautionary tale. They said Karen was now desperately trying to sell products online, without any success. My father worked part-time at an auto repair shop, but the income was nowhere near enough to cover their basic living expenses. They were living in hardship, real, grinding hardship. And for the very first time in their lives, they were facing the same harsh reality I had known since childhood: scarcity and the relentless struggle to survive. A month after Karen's desperate call, another letter arrived from my father. This wasn't an apology like the last one. This was a plea. He wrote that the family was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. Their rented apartment was now at risk of eviction due to months of unpaid rent. Sam, after being fired from his third job, had completely given up on finding steady work and had started hanging out with a bad crowd, drinking, causing trouble in town. My father wrote that he had no one else to turn to, that I was their last hope. He used the word family repeatedly, hammering it, as if it could magically awaken some dormant sense of duty in me. I read the letter in my opulent room at Grandpa Arthur's mansion, sitting on the king-size bed I still wasn't entirely used to. Each word felt like a knife, twisting, reopening old wounds. I remembered the years of being pushed aside, being called unworthy, constantly being compared to Sam as a cruel reminder that I was never, ever good enough. I remembered the lonely nights, lying on that creaky bed in the attic, just wondering why I wasn't loved. And I remembered that devastating Christmas night when I learned that everything I had ever longed for, a home, an opportunity, a chance, had been ruthlessly stolen by my father and Karen. I called Grandpa Arthur and told him about the letter. He listened, his eyes darkening, just as they had that Christmas night 2 years ago. "What are you going to do?" he asked, his voice steady, but utterly without pressure. He always respected my decisions, though I knew he was still absolutely furious about what David had done. "I'm not going to help them," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "They had their chance. Sam had everything I didn't. A car. A nice room. Our parents' love. If he has to work to survive now, that's a lesson he needs to learn." I pulled myself up from nothing, Grandpa. "I don't owe them anything." Grandpa Arthur nodded slowly, saying nothing more. But I knew deep down, he approved of my decision. He had once wanted to sue David, to seek justice for me. But I had chosen to let the past go, and now I chose not to let it drag me back down. So, while David's family struggled, crumbling, back in Ohio, I continued my journey here in Chicago. I aced my midterms, and Emily, my close friend, threw a small party to celebrate. She had become such an essential, beautiful part of my life, not just for her radiant smile, but for the way she made me feel like I was truly enough. I took on more and more work at Grandpa Arthur's company, handling larger projects, and even leading a small construction job in suburban Chicago. Each step, each success, was undeniable proof that I didn't need my father's or Karen's validation to succeed. I also started writing a book. Not necessarily to just recount my story, but to document the profound lessons I'd learned about resilience, about truly finding self-worth, and about ultimately overcoming the deep, lingering scars of the past. I didn't know if it would ever be published, but writing it was a powerful way to heal, to turn that raw pain into undeniable strength. Then, one winter day, as I walked through bustling downtown Chicago, I saw Sam. Unexpectedly. He was standing on a street corner, wearing this thin, inadequate jacket, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow and sunken. I stopped, unsure whether to even approach him. But he saw me first. And his eyes, they lit up with a faint, desperate flicker of hope. "Leo," he called out, his voice weak. "How are you?" I nodded, keeping my distance. "I'm fine, Sam. You?" He gave a weak, pathetic smile. He was no longer the arrogant, entitled boy I once knew. "Not great," he admitted, looking away. "Things aren't like they used to be. Can you help me?" "Just a little. I don't have anyone else." I looked at him then. I remembered all the times he was favored, adored, showered with everything. All the times I was pushed aside, forgotten. Sam, I said, my voice calm, but absolutely unyielding. I had to stand on my own when no one helped me. You can too. Get a job. Learn to take responsibility. Don't look to me to fix what your family did wrong. I turned then, and I walked away, continuing down Chicago's snow-covered streets. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care at all, but because I had finally, truly chosen myself. What about you? If you were in my shoes after everything, would you have chosen differently? Would you have helped them or walked away? Let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts.